Welcome to the Effortless English Show with the world's #1 English teacher, AJ Hogue, where AJ's more than 40 million students worldwide finally learn English once and for all, without the boring textbooks, classrooms, and grammar drills. Here's AJ with a quick piece to help you learn to speak fluent English effortlessly.
Hi, I'm AJ Hogue, the author of Effortless English. Learn to speak English like a native. Join my VIP program at effortlessenglishclub.com, effortlessenglishclub.com, to speak English fluently and powerfully, and indeed effortlessly. Commit at effortlessenglishclub.com. Welcome. We're live on Facebook. We have a special show today. It is very, very early in the morning or late at night in Japan. Having an interview today with Sri Dharma Pravartaka Acharya. And he's ready. I'll be calling him on Skype in a minute. We're going to talk about this topic of natural law or Dharma. You know, I did a show about that topic, I think it was a week ago, maybe a couple weeks ago. But he is really an expert on this topic. He is a Sanatana Dharma teacher. He also has a PhD, a doctorate in religious studies. He's the author of this book, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. Really great book. Fantastic. I love this book. Love it. And he has a equally great YouTube channel. Which is on the screen right here, Dharma Nation. Dharma Nation. So YouTube/Dharma Nation. That's how I found him. I found him on YouTube. I found one of his videos on YouTube. I think I did a search for Sanatana Dharma, and one of his videos popped up. So I watched it, and it was amazing. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. So I went to his channel, and then I just started watching his videos. I couldn't stop. I watched all of his videos, every single video on his channel. And since then, I have watched many of them several times. And then I got his book, a couple of his books, actually. This is probably the best one to start with, I'd say. Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. Is kind of, I think, his, his foundational book, right? Kind of the foundation of his teaching. But then he's got many other books too. And you can also check that out. dharmacentral.com. Dharmacentral.com is his website. He's also the founder and director of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, I believe it is, which is also fantastic. And you can get more information about that at dharmacentral.com as well. Where to start? I would recommend the YouTube channel. If the English is, try it. Watch some of his videos and see if the English is too difficult. Then maybe the book would be good because you can go slowly with reading, right? So that might be good. Okay, just a quick hello, and then I'm going to call on Skype, and we will, pray to the internet gods that it works, that my software works. Okay, let's see. Just a quick. Let me just say a quick hello to everybody. We've got a lot of familiar names, so it must be a good time for some of you still. Wow, Tamil Nadu, so India, that means you are really early morning like me. Hey, Donna, nice to see you. Taha in Egypt, Ibrahim, hello, Syria. Cardo, good to see you as well. Lisa in Hungary. So the Europeans and Middle Easterners, but I'm surprised to see someone from India. It's even earlier. Hey, Tata. Okay, fantastic. Well, let's just get started because you don't want to listen to me talk. You listen to me talk all the time. Let's talk to Acharya Ji, and I'm just going to ask him questions about natural law, and I'm going to try to shut up and just let him talk. Okay, now let's see if we can get Skype to work. That is going to be the key thing here. All right. Oh, here we go. Oh, and as usual, finally, for those of you who are watching live, as usual, we'll just ignore your comments and questions for a while, and after we discuss, I've got some questions here after the end of my questions. If we still have time, He's only got about an hour. If we still have time, then I'll come to your comments and I'll pick some of your questions. Okay, let's get started and see if this will work. Oh, I gotta put my headphones on. Hello, Acharya, nice to see you.
AJ, it is wonderful meeting you.
Thank you
so much for contacting me.
Yes, wonderful. I was just talking, just introducing you. I'm trying to figure out which camera to look at. Just talking about your book, which is wonderful, wonderful. Love this book and your YouTube channel, both amazing. So I'm really excited to get you onto our podcast here and talk about Sanatana Dharma and natural law.
Well, thank you so much. And before we start, actually, let me just say that I've recently become aware of your work as well. And let me tell you, I am extremely impressed. I've seen several of your videos. I've seen, just quite a few different things that you've been doing, certainly your Facebook page, etc. And let me tell you, the work that you're doing is phenomenal. Teaching English to so many millions of people. It's just truly an astounding service that you're doing. You are an expert at it. You are great at it, and I can tell that you love what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much.
That makes you an excellent teacher. So I'm very impressed with your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it. I already gave you hopefully a good introduction, so let's just jump in, shall we? Because I think everyone wants to listen to you talk today, not me. What is natural law? We should start with the big topic. Now, I know you've got... this is a really big question because you've got a whole video about this, but what is Dharma? What is natural law?
Sure, a whole video and a 500-page book just explaining just what is Dharma. Well, I will try to explain this as succinctly as possible because truthfully, this is what's wonderful about the concept of Dharma. That yes, it is something that can be understood so deeply and philosophically that you need a 500-page book to understand it. But on the other hand, interestingly, it's also a very simple concept because it's a concept that's fundamental to what it means to be a living being. So truthfully, I'll try to explain this as succinctly and, just in as easy a way as I can for all of your viewers and listeners. Essentially, this is the idea. The concept of Dharma basically means natural order, the natural way, natural law. There are several ways that you can translate this word. Truthfully, there is no exact English translation for the word. And I've said that many times. It's not like, the word water can have one word translation in so many different languages. Not the same with Dharma. The reason why that's the case is because what Dharma is explaining is a philosophical concept. And this is what the concept is. That when we look at the universe around us, as everyone does at some point in their lives, if you're a human being, if you're inquisitive in any way whatsoever, at some point as a human being, we look at the universe around us and we just wonder, what is this? Why is there a universe versus not a universe? Why does this all exist? What is my place in this universe? Is there meaning behind it? All of these philosophical questions that, again, everyone asks. Well, when we ask this question, yes, we can come to one of two conclusions. We can either look at the universe around us and come to, let's say, the materialistic conclusion that, it's all just random forces of nature crashing into each other and then creating other elements, cause and effect, etc. There really is no thought behind it. It's all just explained scientifically, and let me just go on with my life, eat, drink, and be merry, and not think too deeply anymore. Right. That's the first conclusion that a person might choose to take. But then there's the second conclusion that a person might choose to take, and that is this. That when I look at the universe around me, I am astounded by its complexity. I'm astounded by the laws, by the principles that I see operating within the universe beyond even my perception. See, this is the thing. Everyone understands. You can be anyone. You could be religious. You could be an atheist. We understand that there are the laws of physics. Can we see the laws of physics? We know that there's gravity. We know that if I take an object like a pen and I let go of it, it's going to drop to the ground. We can see the effect, but do we see the cause? Do we see gravity itself? These are laws. These are principles that are there that give the universe order. Well, anyone can understand this. Again, even someone who has no belief in anything spiritual understands this. But this is what Dharma teaches us, that in addition to the laws of actual physics, there are also laws of metaphysics, what so many people have called metaphysics, that which is beyond even physics. So amazingly, again, we can't even see the physical laws themselves. We can't see gravity. But then what to speak of those laws that are beyond even the physical? This is what Dharma is pointing to. So getting back to this scenario, when I look at the universe around me, the second conclusion and the deeper and more meaningful conclusion that I can come to is that this is a universe that is operating on infinite intelligence, through infinite intelligence, in such a way that there is order to the universe that even if I don't understand it right now, even if I can't see these laws operating, I can feel the effects nonetheless. And I understand that, yes, the cosmos is a place of beauty. It's a place of harmony. It's a place of meaning. It's a place where, rather than looking out into the night sky and just seeing darkness with just maybe a bunch of stars, instead, I see a divine being who has created this and who loves me. Now, when we take this second approach to understanding the meaning of the cosmos, that's Dharma. That is Dharma, understanding that there is natural law that is there. Now, interestingly, and I don't know how much time we have. If I tend to go on a little bit too long with my answers, please interrupt me. Don't be afraid to, because I have a reputation that I can go on for a very long time.
So do I.
Very good. Really good partners and a good discussion. So more than this is another very interesting principle to understand about Dharma. So number one, Dharma means natural law. Those principles that are there, which again, we can't see these principles, just like you can't see the principle of gravity, but they operate nonetheless. That's the first thing. Second important thing is this. These laws are universal. In other words, when we speak about Dharma, we're not talking about, let's say, a religious or theological concept in the normal sense of those terms. We're not talking about a sect. We're not talking about, oh, yes, this sect accepts Dharma, but this sect does not. And no, we're not talking about something sectarian. Rather, again, like gravity, it doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't even matter what your philosophical stance is. Gravity is a fact. And regardless of whether you believe in it or not, you can say, well, I don't believe in gravity, so thus I'm going to just walk right off of this building. Well, you're going to feel the effects of gravity nonetheless. So this is the second point. Dharma is something that is universal. It has nothing to do with whether you believe in it or not. It has its effect nonetheless. It transcends religion in the normal sense of that term. Again, my religion versus your religion. Rather, the concept of Dharma is a concept that existed before religion. And for some people, this may seem like a somewhat controversial statement. It really isn't. The idea of sects, the idea of, again, my religion versus your religion, this is only a few thousand years old, this whole concept of sectarian religion. Previous to even the idea of religion, there was the idea of natural law, and that if we live in accordance with these laws, we will have prosperity. Now, finally, the third thing about Dharma is that Dharma also is eternal. In other words, just like the laws of physics, it's not that the law of gravity came into being in 1952. Right. Oh, no, everyone could just float. No, these are principles that are eternal. And what is meant by eternal is Dharma, the natural law, always has existed. It exists now. It always shall exist. And nothing can make Dharma cease. Nothing can make natural law cease. So these are the three most important points as far as what is Dharma. We can certainly go much deeper, but maybe I'll take a little pause here, see if you have any other questions about this.
And, well, as you said, too, not Dharma itself is eternal, but the understanding of Dharma, the realization of Dharma is very, very, very old, right? As you said, predating, I guess, really all organized religions that we have now. I'm assuming, right? That these are,
Yes.
as far as we know, they're how far back, like what are the oldest writings or teachings that we know of? I'm asking some extra questions, but that we know of, that where this concept, this idea of whether it's called Dharma or natural law. I mean, how far back that we know does it go?
Sure, that's an excellent question. This is, as far as, let's say, a philosophical concept in the broadest sense of that term, meaning either religion, philosophy, anything. This is the oldest, most ancient concept in existence. And I can say that very, very boldly and very easily because someone can just look it up. The first mention of Dharma exists in the first writing known to humanity, known as the Veda. Rig Veda specifically. And again, people can just look this up. This is not anything controversial. The Rig Veda specifically is the oldest human writing known in history. And in this book itself, which is in Sanskrit, you have mention of Dharma by that exact term, in fact, and you have explanations of what precisely is Dharma. So it literally exists in the first writing known to humanity. And the other thing that is interesting, dealing again with the eternality and the universality of this concept. This is something that I talk about in my book, Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way, as well as all of my books, actually, the Dharma Manifesto, several others. All of the ancient, truly ancient cultures, and what I mean by truly ancient, up until, let's say, roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, all of the ancient cultures understood Dharma. They understood and they tried to follow this concept. So this is something else I have to throw in here. It's unfortunate that many people make the mistake of thinking that Dharma is something specifically, quote unquote, either Eastern or having to do with India, maybe East Asia, etc. No, that's not the case. The concept of Dharma was upheld by every ancient civilization. And let me explain what I mean by this, just so people truly understand. Certainly in what today is called India, all of South Asia, but more than this, the concept of natural law, of Dharma, was upheld by every culture, every tribe, every civilization, every nation in ancient Europe, quite literally from Ireland all the way to Russia. So the ancient Greeks, they understood and wrote about natural law. Of course, they didn't use the Sanskrit word dharma because they wrote in Greek. They used the word physis, which is the word where you get physics. Interesting. But it means natural law. The ancient Romans believed, very much in natural law. They have hundreds of writings just about natural law. They called it Liga Natura, or natural law. And the way they describe it is exactly how I and others who follow Dharma describe it. Again, there's no difference. The ancient Germanic people, the ancient Slavic people, the ancient Celtic people, all throughout Europe understood the concept of natural law, and they had words in their local languages for natural law. The Chinese in China, Dharma is known as Tao. For anyone who understands the religion or the concept of Taoism, that Taoism basically is Dharmaism. Tao means the same thing, the way, the natural law. And again, if you read the primary textbook of Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, it is describing Dharma perfectly.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, and I can go on and on. In ancient Egyptian, it's known as Ma'at. Same concept, that there is a natural functioning, a natural law to the universe. Ancient Persian, it's known as Asha. And on. You can imagine. There are hundreds of words in the ancient languages for this concept. So yes, this is the most ancient, and at one time, not anymore, unfortunately, and we can talk about that later, but at one time, this was the most important philosophical concept on the face of the earth, Dharma, or natural law.
It would seem to imply that so many cultures and thinkers spread out over such a large distances, finding the same concept. I mean, it reminds me of if there's physical laws. In other words, it's something that exists that they are finding rather than something they're creating. If that's,
yes.
Does that make sense? Is that correct?
That is more than correct. Actually, that is extremely accurate. Yes. In fact, this is another way that we know that Dharma is something of great significance that we have to take very seriously. The fact that, yes, despite all these disparate cultures, all these various cultures all throughout history, again and again, even independently, people will, in one way or another, come back to the idea of Dharma. It's interesting how it's just revealed to them. Again, to give this parallel example, because I know many people are especially trained in the sciences, so they can appreciate this. In the same way that, oh, Sir Isaac Newton, so he discovered gravity? It didn't exist before him? No, of course not.
Right.
Gravity is a concept that has always been there, and certain cultures in history, they'll understand it, then they don't understand it again, but then some brilliant person will come about and again rediscover this eternal principle. The same thing with Dharma. In the same way, this explains why every ancient culture understood and tried to follow Dharma. Even if Dharma were to disappear, which it almost has, unfortunately, sadly, I have to say, in our modern materialistic, consumeristic sort of age that we're living in, of course, not a lot of people think about higher spiritual principles like this. But the truth is, this is the nature of Dharma. It can never truly disappear because it is something that's inherent to nature itself, because it's something that is simply there, the hidden principles behind what we actually see of nature. It will always be rediscovered again and again by individuals who have the ability to rediscover it. And I'm hoping at some point you'll ask me, how does a person rediscover it?
Yeah. I love to get to the practical, so let's go for that right now, because as you said, we're living in a very, very, very materialistic world. Anti-dharmic, I guess you could call it. So how does, I guess, at both the individual level, just an individual, and the greater level, groups, families, societies, how do we rediscover that and align our lives with Dharma?
Yeah, this is something that's crucial for us to understand, and especially in today's age where, yes, it seems that people have gone away from their true selves, from their authentic selves. So how is it that an individual indeed rediscovers these ancient principles and lives in accordance with them? Well, there is indeed a process, and what that process is spiritual development through what in Sanskrit, and I made a vow to myself to not throw too much Sanskrit either at you or your audience, but I have to throw a little bit. Sure. There is this word called sadhana, and basically all this word means is spiritual practice. The way that we understand these laws of nature is by practicing spirituality. And what that means very practically is meditation. Meditation in the deepest and most meaningful sense of that term. Of course, we know that today so many people talk about meditation. It's one of those words that has almost become meaningless. So many people just throw it around, and people have their own idea of what meditation is. I'm not making this up. I actually heard someone like 20 years ago who they were watching some football game or something, and they claimed that they were meditating on the game. People will throw out all these different ideas of what they think meditation is. But no, what meditation truly means in the smallest nutshell is very simply stilling ourselves from all external distractions in such a way that we go within. And in the same way that we have external senses, in the same way that we can see, we can hear, etc., what meditation does is it awakens the internal sense. It awakens our ability to see and to know from within, spiritually, intuitively, etc. So it's when we engage in meditation very specifically that we then become more attuned to these natural laws, these natural principles that are there in the universe. And we can understand them better. We can almost literally, not literally with the eyes, but we can almost see them operating, at least as cause and effect. We begin to see cause and effect in a much deeper sort of way. So this is the way that we open ourselves to understanding natural law. And for that matter, meditation itself. Maybe in the future we should do like an hour and a half podcast just on meditation, because that alone we can talk about for a long
That's
time.
That'd be great, because I was just been asked some questions about meditation, like how should I start? And all right, we'll do it.
But let me just say, yes, it's through meditation that we achieve everything that we desire spiritually. Through meditation, we have self-realization. Through meditation, we understand and can intuit and practice better natural law or dharma. And through meditation, ultimately, we can know the divine. We can know our source. We can know what in many religions, including myself, call God. Mm-hmm. It's in meditation that we know God. You know, I believe I forget which book, but somewhere even in the Old Testament where it actually says, be still and know that I am God. God himself actually says this in the Bible, be still. In other words, do meditation. And in this way, you realize God who is living within the temple of the body.
I think it was, I can't remember. I think it was, somewhere. I think you said this, if not, correct me. But that you're comparing prayer to meditation, and prayer is talking to God, and meditation is listening to God.
Yes, exactly.
Is that a fair?
Exactly, yes. And you need both. Mm-hmm. You need both. You know, if you're having a conversation, like we're having a conversation, well, how do you have a proper conversation? You speak, I listen. I speak, you listen. And it's a back and forth like this. Well, in prayer, if all we do is pray, and don't get me wrong, we should pray. Prayer is very powerful. It's a wonderful thing to do. But if all that we are doing in our relationship with the divine is we're talking, but we never take the time to just be quiet and listen back to see how is God responding, well, then it's a one-way conversation. Well, prayer is speaking to God, but then meditation is finally sitting and listening to the response. That's the idea of meditation.
Wow, that's great. At a practical level, would you say that meditation then is really the core for some? I mean, just, you know, an individual wanting to live dharmically, find dharma, be in harmony with dharma, that is the way to start. The
Absolutely.
Most important step.
Yes, definitely. Meditation is something that's very practical. This is what's wonderful about meditation. Again, don't get me going on meditation, but this is what's wonderful about meditation. It's practical. It's something in which you don't have to spend money. You know, not to criticize anyone else who asks for large sums of money to learn meditation. No, you don't have to pay. You don't have to pay money. You don't need props. You don't need anything. This is all you need: a quiet area and the determination to meditate. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. And that's what's wonderful about it. Regardless of who you are, where you find yourself, again, if you can just find a place that is not too distracting, you sit, and you sit in a way that's respectful, meaning, you don't want to be slouched over. You don't want to be kind of, in a lazy position and claiming that you're meditating. No, you are communing with God. So thus, you be respectful. You sit up in a nice straight way, but comfortably so. You close your eyes, and this is the idea. Our senses are always bombarded by external stimuli, constantly, 24 hours a day. Even when we're sleeping, actually, our senses are still being stimulated by things that we're not even aware of. Well, this is the idea of meditation. What we're doing is we are putting all of that stimuli to rest. We close our eyes. We are in a quiet room, so we're not hearing anything. We try to be still, so we're not feeling anything. We put the senses to rest. We give them a rest. See, everything needs a rest. Mm-hmm. We know that. Imagine if we were a jogger and we decided, okay, I'm going to jog and just never stop. Right. 5 weeks later, I'm still jogging. We would be dead at that point. Well, we need to put our senses to rest also. So this is what meditation is. We put our senses to rest. We focus on our breath in order to relax everything, even the most subtle aspects of our body and our mind and our psyche. And then what we do is, in that very deep state, we listen. We observe. We are aware. We are aware. Can I tell this very, very quick story?
Sure.
That this reminds me of, actually? And True story. For anyone in your audience who's Buddhist, they know this story if they know the life of the Buddha. But this is one of my favorite spiritual stories. So this occurred at some point after the Buddha achieved enlightenment. Gautama Buddha. And after he achieved enlightenment, he finally stands up after he had been meditating himself. How did he achieve enlightenment? Well, meditation. But he finally gets up and he walks out of the forest where he was. And the first people he encounters, they're amazed by how he even looks. Because this is the thing. When a person is spiritual, they have an effulgence to them. They have a charisma. They have a presence to them that is amazing. So they see this person walking toward them, the Buddha, and they're amazed. Who is this person? He's just glowing. And they go up to him and they say, "Sir, who are you?" And the answer he gives them makes history. He doesn't give his name. He doesn't say anything about his body or his identity. His answer to that question, "Sir, who are you?" is very simple. "I am awake." That was his answer. "I am awake. That is who I am." So this is the thing that is amazing. This is what we are trying to achieve in meditation. We're trying to become awake on a deep level. Of course, well, I'm awake right now, otherwise I wouldn't be listening to you. We don't mean simply on the physical level, that you're not sleeping right now. See, this is the thing that's amazing, is of course the vast majority of individuals who are traversing the earth right now, walking in cars and planes, whatever, they can be doing things, they can be active. But if you don't know who you truly are, if you don't know what is the nature of reality, if you're going through this world in such a way that you're just doing everything by route, just kind of, not really thinking, you're not really awake. What it means to be awake is to understand the subtle dimensions of everything that is happening around you and why ultimately you are doing what you're doing. Not merely what is your task in front of you right now. Well, I'm in this cab to get to this place. No, that's a task. Why are you even doing? Why are you doing anything? Why are you alive to begin with? Unless we know these things, we're not awake, not in the spiritual sense. So this is ultimately what we try to do with meditation, is again, by being very quiet, stilling all the senses, going deep within, simply breathing and being in a state of complete calm and peace, we begin to understand several things. Who we are, our true self, because our true self is in here. What people call the soul or the self, the true self. In Sanskrit, it's called Atman. Atman simply means the true self, not the artificial self, not the false identity that all of us identify with. This is the example that I give. If I were to ask someone, who are you? Well, if they, wanted to be, if they wanted to, be smart, quote unquote, they would whip out their driver's license and they would say, "Oh, this is who I am. This is who I am. Oh, it even has my picture on there." And of course, what would my answer be to them? Really? So everything that you are is encapsulated on a little card that is 2 inches by 3 inches? Really? That's who you are? You're simply those numbers, those statistics, that two-dimensional little face that's there? Is that truly who you are? Are you simply your name? We all have a name, but that name was given to us. Our name could have been potentially anything. Our parents chose, John. Well, we could have been Frank. We could have been Peter. We could have been anything. So no, we're not simply that name. It's just an identifier, but it doesn't point to our essence. You can't see it right now because I have my hair in a ponytail, but I have long hair, ordinarily. A person might say, "Oh, well, who is Acharya?" Well, he is the person with long hair. Well, I didn't always have long hair. At one point, I had a shaved head and then normal hair. Now I have very long hair. All of these things that we try to point to and we say, "Oh, this is me. This is who I am. I am the face that I see in the mirror every day." Really? Well, did that face look exactly the same when we were 5 years old? Is that face going to look the same when, God willing, we're 85 years old? No, the face is going to change. So when we talk about knowing that true self, of course, we're talking about knowing that aspect of ourselves that, even though everything else changes, my face changes, my weight changes, my hair, that aspect of us that does not change, that is always there, that is the true self, that's the soul. So that's what we are trying to know in meditation. In addition, what I like to call the soul of our soul. We also want to know God, and that also we can know in meditation. Because again, this is the universal understanding of the nature of God, that God is always with us. That there is nothing in existence that doesn't have the presence of God within it. If God's presence were not there, that thing would not exist. That includes us. We exist, we can do, we can be for only one purpose, that God is with us, sustaining us, giving us what we need. Well, it's in meditation, again, going deep within, that we can begin to experience the presence of God who is there within us as well. So this is why, almost regardless of the religious tradition that you can speak of, the great sages and saints of so many religious traditions, when they wish to truly know God, what do? They go within. They sit, they're still, they are quiet, and they go inside themselves to know both themselves, but also that divine presence that is there within them at all times, God. This is meditation. And this is why, yes, if we want to know Dharma, if we want to know ourselves, if we want to know God, if we want to know anything of true significance, eternal significance, then we meditate.
Wow, powerful. Wow. Whew. So for Dharma itself, we're kind of talking at a really high level and kind of that it is, God, and it emanates from God. Is that correct?
Yes.
But then also operates at the very smallest level, at a very practical level too. Could you just talk a little more about that? That, like sometimes some people think about Dharma or natural law or these as something very, very high and philosophical, or maybe the opposite, just very practical. But it's really at all levels, right? I mean, this is.
Yeah.
See if I can would it be fair to say this, it's kind of God operating through how God operates through or emanates through all? I mean, you can explain it better than I.
Oh, no, you're correct. Dharma, God is present within all beings. God is present in everything. And again, it's God's presence that even gives all things its very existence. But as far as understanding Dharma in, let's say, somewhat more practical and immediate sense, yes, there are many ways in which we can understand this. And again, it's interesting how these are universals that you see in all, let's say, well-functioning societies. So I'll give some examples. Natural virtues. The virtues that almost any, again, good culture tries to instill upon us. So, for example, being virtuous people. And what does that mean? That means being people who try our best to be nonviolent. We try to approach everyone with compassion. We try to approach people with kindness. These are all aspects of Dharma, but in a very practical, very down-to-earth sort of way. What it means to practice Dharma, for example, as far as virtues is, again, we try to have compassion toward all people. And what that means is, regardless of whether someone approaches us as a friend or an enemy, we try our best to approach them with love, And of course, in an intelligent way, if someone tries to physically attack us, we're not going to just do nothing. We believe in self-defense. But at the same time, we do our best to try to understand that, well, why is this person attacking me? The person's attacking me because they're in ignorance, they're in illusion. They're trying to steal something from me, or they feel some sort of hatred toward me for some reason that they themselves don't even understand. So again, we try to approach people as much as possible with love, with compassion. We ourselves try to be wise. These are several, and there are really hundreds of virtues that we can develop, but these are a few of the most important ones. Being wise. is something that is a virtue of Dharma that we are meant to develop. What does it mean to be wise? Well, it means to look at the most ancient teachings that exist that try to teach us what is the meaning of life. So we try to cultivate wisdom. We try to cultivate goodness. And again, what is meant by goodness? It means to try to approach everyone with kindness rather than its opposite, rather than trying to be, trying to steal from them, trying to harm them, etc. And I can go on and on. We all know these various virtues that all well-functioning societies try to teach us. And again, the reason why we know that these virtues are dharmic is because they are eternal and they are universal. How many cultures have there been throughout history where the society will teach us, oh, yes, what you should do is try to be as evil as you can. That's not a universal concept. No, instead, what we see is, and again, it's not that people necessarily are always successful at doing this, but at the very least, what we've seen is that all throughout history and universally, religions, cultures, well-functioning societies, they try to teach us to be virtuous, to be good people, to do the right thing, in other words. Well, that's Dharma. That's a very practical aspect of Dharma.
Why do you think that now, or we don't see that? Because now, I'd say, in let's just say popular global society, media, the channels that we mostly get, even schools too, they don't teach virtues. I mean, I think that we are living in a time, it seems, where around the world that we're not only don't teach virtues, God is absent. I mean, what do you think the roots of this are, and how can it be corrected? This sort of sickness that we have.
That's a good way to describe it. It's a sickness, and it's interesting. You see this in America even more so than, let's say, in Asia. But unfortunately, it's affecting Asia as well. Things that happen in America tend to then affect the rest of the world, which is both good and bad. In this case, bad. In America, in the schools, yeah, it's very bad. Not only do they not teach virtues anymore, in many cases, they teach quite literally the opposite.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to give examples, actually.
I give them all the time.
Okay, so. Good. I'm trying not to be too controversial because I don't know the nature of your audience, but
you can attack the schools all you want.
Okay. In American schools, it is horrific where, yes, values have been quite literally, not only are they not taught anymore, they're turned upside down. Yeah. Where what was considered to be bad in the past is now good. What was considered to be good 50 years ago is now the opposite. So, yes, it's a tremendous problem. As far as why this is the case, this is something I could talk about very in depth, but I'll just try to sum this up. Essentially, for the last roughly 200 years, of course, we've gone through an industrial, then a technological revolution that has been a double-edged sword. It's been very good. Everyone loves their iPhones. I have an iPhone. Everyone, we're talking on computers right now, etc. So technology is wonderful, but this is the difficulty. If human beings do not, in their own ethics and morality and in who they are spiritually, if they do not keep up with technological development, then what ends up happening is you have a lot of bad people using good technology. Mm-hmm. And it's not, and of course, it's not to say that all people using technology, it's not that they're all bad, but you do have bad people. Technology is something that it's a neutral item. It's kind of like a gun. People talk about gun violence all the time. There's no such thing as gun violence. There's people violence using guns. Right. A gun is an inanimate object. You can use it as a paperweight. I don't have one, but I could have a pistol right now and just use it as a paperweight to keep my papers down. It's a thing. But of course, it depends on the individual who's using it. If you're in trouble and you have a police officer coming to you and he's got a gun on him, you feel safe. But then vice versa. If there's a thief and he's got a gun, you don't feel safe. Well, in the same way, this is true for all technology. Technology can be used for good or bad, and this is the difficulty, is that unfortunately, the technology has progressed so quickly, but people have not. You know, individuals have not had the ability to catch up morally with the technology. And what happens as a result is that this leads then to mass confusion. This leads to the very question of, oh, is there even such a thing as morality? Is there even good versus bad, etc.? When technology progresses too quick and people are just inching along, not keeping up with it, what ends up happening is people just become overwhelmed. They become confused. And this is what we see today. Everyone today, you know, some notable exceptions, meditators, everyone today is confused. Everyone is overwhelmed. Everyone is stressed. Everyone is in anxiety. Everyone is trying to, in addition to working on their own lives, going to work, getting their education, just trying to focus on themselves. Everyone also is getting a million mixed messages about what's happening in the world. Why are we here? What's happening with the technology, etc. And as a result, morality in many cultures has collapsed because of this confusion. So we've seen this in America. You know, I'm in America. I was born in America, and I've seen this all of my life. I've seen for the last 55 years, which is how long I've been alive, the technology shoot off like a rocket and people catching up to it at a snail's pace, not catching up. So what we've seen is that in America, for example, we've gone from a society where at one time you could be safe in even major cities just walking the streets to now you're not safe anywhere. And again, don't get me going as far as how bad things have become in American culture. And as I talk about American culture, I love America. I'm a patriot, actually. I love America. But the point is, it does originate here, from Hollywood, from Silicon Valley, and it infects the rest of the world. So what we see now is, for example, just to give one of what are probably thousands of examples, we see a nation like India, where they have one of the most ancient, most beautiful cultures in the world, where they have temples that are some of the most ancient, most magnificent buildings in the world, and then right next door there's a McDonald's. For many Indians, they can't even distinguish between the two. Oh, temple, McDonald's, just buildings. Not understanding that, oh my God, there's a world of difference. The McDonald's will give you garbage food that will take away your health. The temple will potentially, if you go there with the right intention, reveal God to you. They're not just two buildings. And unfortunately, people have a difficult time seeing this today, this distinction.
What you're mentioning just mentioning that example of these two buildings. What strikes me is that as a society or a nation moves away from Dharma, that I guess you could say that the ugliness inside starts to manifest in the outside, because I've seen this myself. The physical environments, the architecture, I guess is probably the one where it's the most noticeable. Where you go to an old European city, and you go to just walking around the old city, or almost any city, really anywhere, even a place like Varanasi or something, and there's some kind of like a beauty or magic, and then any modern city, it's just the ugliness, like you mentioned, the McDonald's, or just the rectangular cement, utilitarian, buildings, and is there a connection? Could you talk about that? The connection between that beauty and Dharma.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. That's a very good insight, actually. Yeah, what you've seen is actually very true. There is indeed a connection between the two. And let me start with this. Dharma cultivates beauty. And the reason why that's the case is because beauty itself is one of the manifestations of God. And many people have talked about this. Plato spoke about this. This is talked about all throughout the Vedic scriptures, that one of the ways that we can appreciate the nature of God is indeed through beauty. So this is why many people who wish to know God, for example, they'll go into nature, into beautiful places, beautiful forests, or places where there are grand vistas, with mountain ranges and things like that. So beauty is definitely one of the ways in which we know God and in which Dharma itself manifests. For this reason, what we've seen historically is that the closer that individuals and societies are to following Dharma, the more beautiful things are. Mm-hmm. The more beautiful people literally like remember the example I was giving with that story about the Buddha. Mm-hmm. He achieved enlightenment and people saw him and they were amazed. Who is this person? He's glowing. Mm. Well, why? The more spiritual you become, the more beautiful you become. And what I mean by beautiful is it's an intangible beauty that just emanates from you. It's not that you go from being an average person to looking like Brad Pitt. We're not talking about that kind of beauty. Yeah. We're talking about a glow, a healthy effulgence that comes from you. That's true for the individual, but then that's also true for anything that is created in the name of Dharma. So yes, if you go back far enough and you see those civilizations that had God in the center, their architecture tends to be beautiful. Their literature is beautiful. The poetry that they wrote, the stories that they wrote, the philosophy that they had, how they tried to organize their cities, was much more logical. Today, a lot of the larger cities are just kind of thrown together. Yeah. I was born and raised in New York City, and if you go to New York, you can see that there's kind of a logical grid in the Midtown area, but then when you get downtown, it's like just jumble of just different streets that don't make sense. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. And when you talk about the architecture very specifically, I'm very much into architecture, actually. And for myself, I have told people point blank, I don't like any architecture that is post, let's say, 1913. Because at that point, it becomes garbage. At that point, it becomes modernist. And it becomes, let's explain what we mean by this. Architecture and culture and arts begin to become impersonal the less Dharma is involved. So when you look at modern buildings, they're impersonal, they're cold. Yeah. There's no beauty that's there. You look at these modern office buildings, what do you see? Glass and steel, glass and steel. If you look at older buildings, again, let's say previous to 1913, it seems that everywhere you look, in almost every niche, they carved something into it. They carved something that looks floral. They carved something that, has beauty to it. In almost every niche, they tried to do that. Today, just plain, again, glass and steel, and that's it. So yes, this is a manifestation of people's consciousness.
Right.
When people have a consciousness in which they are aware of what is truly of importance, everything that they do, for the most part, there are exceptions, but you see the beauty in what they do. Mm-hmm. Versus a culture in which people's consciousness has become materialistic, and all they think about is the practical. Oh, I have to get up in the morning, do rush hour for an hour and a half, get to work, get home, eat, go to sleep, and this is their daily routine. And when this is all that they can think about, and God is not the center of their life, well, that's reflected in the architecture, in the culture that is in movies, in television, etc. Everything without Dharma becomes shallow and meaningless. It is Dharma that invests meaning into things. Thus, you have beauty. When that meaning is gone, what you have is just plainness and impersonalism. Mm-hmm. Everything just becomes devoid of beauty.
You mentioned this. You were talking about God. I think it was 2 days ago. I was talking and I was talking about God. I mentioned God, and I had a comment from someone who said he struggles with this because just the word God kind of triggers in him some I don't know, not necessarily negative, but very limited ideas. Kind of the what I would call the cartoon idea of God, of man in beard standing on a cloud, controlling everybody. And so he was asking me the question of, like how to handle this. Like what advice would you give to someone who let's say, is open to spirituality, to Dharma, to natural law, but that for whatever reason, they hear the word God, and I can kind of relate to it because I grew up in the South, and I kind of got, the version of God I got often growing up was very, I would say, limited, and so I would also get triggered by this word a lot. God, and I kind of, I don't like that. And, I've kind of found my way back to and being very comfortable with the word God, but I kind of had to go the route of Dharma to do that. So anyway, how would you respond to people who struggle with that, whether they're agnostic or whether they just have bad experiences?
Sure. Well, what you've said is correct. It is understandable. Even for myself, as a highly spiritual person, I'm a spiritual teacher, in fact, not just a practitioner, and I understand it. I understand why, for some reason, when they hear the word itself, what happens is it brings forth all of this baggage that they were taught for all of their lives about what is God, some of which may be correct, some not. Mm-hmm. And this is the difficulty, is that when, of course, I'm speaking about God, first of all, I'm using the word God because it's simply a very convenient thing to do. Everyone understands at least what the word is pointing to, even if not very in-depth what God actually is. At least they understand what the word is pointing to. So that's why, just for convenience, for the sake of communication, you have to use the word. Mm. So I use the word, and I'll say the divine, but it's really saying the same thing. But the truth of the matter is, for individuals who have had, let's say, negative experiences associated with the word God, and I've met many of them. I've met thousands of individuals who have been like this, where, like yourself, maybe they were brought up in a more, let's say, somewhat fundamentalist or somewhat fanatical sort of background. And this is, of course, what I'll do with them. I'll explain, well, okay, I understand you don't like the word God, but do me a favor. When I say the word God, what comes to mind for you? And they'll explain something similar to what you just said. Oh, this man in the sky who just judges everyone, and if he doesn't like what you do, he hurls a thunderbolt at you, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And I'll just let the person go on explaining this, and then finally I'll say, okay, what you just described is in no way what I mean by the word God. What I have in mind is something very different, and it has nothing to do, like with Dharma. You remember how I explained Dharma? Mm-hmm. It transcends denominations, sectarianism, etc. And rather, it is something that precedes all of these things. In the same way, when I use the word God, what I have in mind is the concept of God that goes along with the concept of Dharma. That is, the concept that transcends denominations and sects and my religion versus your religion. Oh, what do you say God is? Oh, well, God is this, God is that. No. When I use the word God, and again, this is a very deep topic, so I'll try to explain this as succinctly as I can. Because I actually wrote another over 400-page book called The Vedic Way of Knowing God. So again, this is something we can talk about very in depth, but I'll say this very succinctly. God is our source. God is that being who is the source of all things. God is that being than which nothing greater can be conceived. God is that being who sustains us. And what do I mean by sustaining? Well, in the same way that, again, just to use an object, there's the pen and my hand is holding the pen up. And without the hand being there, the pen would just fall into nothingness. God, in the same way, sustains us. God gives us our existence. We have being, we have life, we have meaning, we have everything that is of true importance because of God sustaining us at all times. And more, what is the nature of God? And I have to use, you see, again, words and terminology are limiting. Yeah. So I have to say him because I have to use some sort of pronoun. So what is the nature of God himself? The nature of God himself is that God is the source of all that is good, all that is positive, all that is true. So what does this mean? Well, again, using beauty as an example, when we look around us, we can see so many things that are beautiful. We can see, let's say, a very ancient building and say, oh, that is so beautiful. We can see a person and say, that is beautiful. We can see a statue and on and on. But what is beauty itself? Beauty itself is one of those things that we recognize it when we see it, but we can't touch it. It's intangible. What is beauty itself? Beauty itself has God as its source, as its origin. What is goodness itself? Again, we can say, oh, this is good. That's a good person. That person just saved someone's life. That's a good person. But what is goodness itself? You can't touch it, but we understand it when we see it. God is the source of goodness. God is the source of beauty. God is the source of truth. God is the source of eternality. God is the source of true love. So when we speak about God, yes, we're not talking about, to use a fancy philosophical term, we're not talking about an anthropomorphic concept. That is a big man in the sky. For so many people, when we think about God, yes, what is God? Oh, he's the big man in the sky, kind of like the Incredible Hulk, except hopefully he can speak a little bit more intelligently.
Zeus. I always think of Zeus.
Yeah. We think of someone who, he is X number, put any number to it, that much more stronger than we are. He's 100,000 times stronger, more powerful. We try to put a number on God, but we see God as just a very big, powerful human. That's not what God is. God is the source of humanity. God is the source of all things. God is not just a number. It's not just that God is 100 billion, and say that for 200,000 years, times stronger or smarter than we are. No, there's no number you can put on God. God is the source of strength. God is the source of wisdom, of truth, of beauty, love, etc. So in a way, God in a way is, the full extent of God is not knowable. God is knowable, interestingly. Some people debate this and they'll say, oh, ultimately we can't know God. Actually, in Sanatana Dharma, we actually say we can know God, but we can't know the full extent of God. But we can understand God. So again, the words that I used, we can understand God is love. We can understand that. But now, how much love? That we can never understand. We can never grasp the infinite, if that makes sense.
Yes.
This is what we're talking about when we're speaking about God, the infinite. This is why it's interesting. I'm the only person who does this. I use, actually, interestingly, a Christian philosopher to explain the nature of God as understood in Dharma, because he said it perfectly. And that is Saint Anselm. He said, what is God? God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived. That was Saint Anselm who said that. And it's brilliant because Sanatana Dharma agrees with that. In other words, whatever number you can put on God, however great you can think God is in any category, God is infinitely greater than that. So when we speak of God, this is what we're talking about. And now, this is all very philosophical and very nice, but this is what makes it personal. This is what makes it radically personal. This being than which nothing greater can be conceived is here with us now, within us, sustaining us and loving us. That's what's amazing. That this being, as quote unquote powerful as this being is, that being is with us, helping us at all times, unbeknownst to us. So many of us, unfortunately, in this world, we often think that we're alone. It's amazing how loneliness is one of the biggest problems today. And it tends to affect people, interestingly, who are in the biggest cities. Like, you can live in New York City and feel alone, even though you're surrounded by people. So many people feel alone, not understanding that we're never alone. Our best friend, who is God, is always there with us. And now this brings everything back full circle. How do we realize that? How do we realize the presence of God that's within us? Through meditation. Again, by being still and being quiet and going within, and we begin to experience that presence of God that is there within us. So all full circle.
Oh, fantastic. Wow. Well, we've already gone an hour. Do you have a little more time, or do you need to go? I don't want to.
It's completely up to you. I do have a little bit more time if you would like to go a little bit further.
I was thinking maybe I could go to our live chat and see see what questions people have.
Sure.
Okay,
absolutely.
great. And let's take a look. See what we got. Am I on the camera? Okay, here we go. Let's see. Okay, everybody. Let's see. We got a lot of. Oh my gosh, we got a lot. Okay, okay, let's go with Alexi here. Alexi's comment. Okay. Dharma for me is a kind of flow of awareness that helps everyone to be a good human being, to be ready to help everyone struggling against evil, such as TV, internet brainwashing, etc. It helps to be a good human being in this complicated world that is full of hatred and envy, etc. So,
I could not have said it better.
oh, great. Fantastic.
That is a very good definition of Dharma, yes.
Unfortunately, someone said, I wonder if Dharma is in Bengali and then they wrote it in Bengali, unfortunately, so I can't read it. All right.
Actually, I can tell you because I know in Bengali it's the same word. It's Dharma.
Oh, okay. Well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Bengali is ultimately based on Sanskrit, so they actually have the exact same word.
Oh, okay, great. So, and this idea, like you said, is just found in so many languages, in so many cultures. Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, I'm apologize here. I'm just scrolling through a ton of comments. Okay. Oh, someone's mentioning the Bhagavad Gita. I know you'll love to talk about that. Okay, I was about to watch your YouTube video on the heart of the Bhagavad Gita, and I got a message that you were going live. Thank you for being a virtuous and spiritual person. Great. Can you talk about the Bhagavad Gita? Where to start? What is special about the Bhagavad Gita? I know that.
Sure, definitely. Well, Bhagavad Gita is an amazing book. It's one of the most important scriptures of Sanatana Dharma, or the Vedic tradition. And Bhagavad Gita itself means the song of God. Bhagavad means God, and Gita means song. And it is one of the most popular books that discusses Dharma. It's been translated into pretty much every language on earth. And the reason why it's so significant is that it's a short book. You know, it doesn't take a very long time to read it. If you sit down and read it from cover to cover, just translation, you could do it in about 3 hours or so. So it's pretty short, but at the same time, it's powerful. It explains Dharma perfectly, and it covers pretty much every important philosophical question that any human being can ask, which is amazing. So, yeah, it's considered to be, just as far as literature, it's a classic because it does that. It's so short, and yet it covers everything succinctly. And what's nice is it's a conversation between two people. It's a conversation between God and then a devotee of God, who, interestingly, the devotee is not a yogi or a saint or a sage. He's a warrior. He's actually a warrior. But this warrior and God have a discussion where the warrior asks God all these philosophical questions, and then God answers. But yeah, again, without going very deeply into it, the Bhagavad Gita is just truly amazing. I would definitely recommend that people read the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita was the first book that I read when I was about 10 years old that made me follow this path myself, the Vedic tradition. I read the Bhagavad Gita when I was about 10, and that was it. I began practicing this path, and I've done so ever since. So it's a powerful book.
Yeah, I agree. I highly recommend get a translation in your language. I would recommend reading it, in your own language first, because it is so powerful, and then you could give it a try in English. And if you're really ambitious, you could go for Sanskrit. Okay, now here's an interesting, someone's got a concern about, Mauricio Jose has a concern about meditation. That in meditation, you're in jeopardy of being influenced by spiritual beings, and you don't know if they're good or bad, and therefore it could be dangerous. I've never have thought about that before.
That is actually a very legitimate question. It's very interesting, and a lot of people have raised this concern about meditation. And let me just say that for the most part is a myth. And this is the reason why, is because meditation is two things. It is an emptying of ourselves of that which is false, but then secondly, it's also communing with God, and you're doing both at the same time. So a lot of people will make the mistake of thinking that, when we do meditation, what we're trying to do is to achieve kind of a nothingness of mind, just becoming blank within, just becoming kind of a blank slate. And then they have this idea that, if you're just an open vessel, then anything can come in. But that's not what meditation is. Meditation, again, is this twofold process where, yes, we rid ourselves of that which is illusory, that which is not true, that which is, that which we think that we are, but we're not. So there's that process of negation, but there's also the even more important process of communing with God, communing with the true. So it's not just that we kind of empty ourselves. No, on the contrary, we fill ourselves with transcendental awareness. We fill ourselves with the presence and the love of God. Yeah, so this, it's very difficult to go wrong with meditation. And again, especially if you do it with the right motivation. If you do it with the motivation of wanting to truly know truth, and to surrender to that truth with humility, with sincerity, God protects us. God is not going to allow us to be attacked by any kind of negative being if we're seeking him. God being the being of the nature of love and compassion and mercy, if we're meditating because we want to know God, God would not allow anything bad to happen to us. So again, our motivation is important. We should meditate to know God.
I wonder, too, if this is some of the confusion, as you'd mentioned earlier, of just the way people use this word meditate, because people will do guided meditations and imagining themselves being rich, and they'll say, I'm meditating because I'm imagining lots of money coming or lots of sex or beautiful,
Yes.
And they'll say, this is meditation. Yes.
Yeah, and that's not. Yeah. Again, it's unfortunate when it comes to a lot of deeper spiritual concepts. There are so many misconceptions that it's horrific. And of course, why are there so many misconceptions? Getting back to what I said earlier, too much technology and people have not caught up with it. There are too many thousands and thousands of websites and videos and just so many voices coming at us from so many different directions that rather than giving us clarification, often the opposite happens. So we need to rid ourselves of these stereotypes of what it means to be spiritual, what it means to meditate, etc. And to understand that, yes, there is indeed an ancient and authentic technique of meditation. And very simply, what that means is that we rid ourselves of that which is not true, and we fill ourselves with that which is true, and that ultimately is God, who is the source of all truth. In a nutshell, that's real meditation. Not just, pick anything I want and just focus on it. Pick pornography, pick a sporting game, pick this, that. And because I'm watching it and focusing, that's meditation. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not actual meditation.
Right. Great. All right. Vladislav says, we're just commenting again. I agree. Schools are getting worse and worse through time. And this leads to a question I have that I thought before, and I forgot to ask. How do we teach Dharma in the sense of our children, our societies, Dharmic education? Because it is gone, certainly in the United States, and as you said, it's infecting the whole world, which is tragic, and even more tragic, as you'd said, not only is it not dharmic, it is anti-dharmic, and in some cases I would say even evil what is being done in schools in the name of education, and it has been hijacked by as a kind of a tool of mind control and for some pretty nefarious things. So what can we do what would a dharmic education look like, and how can we start moving in that direction to create that?
Yeah, excellent, very important question. First of all, of course, education begins in the home. So this is the first thing, is the way that we teach children is more than anything by example. And I've taught many children, many contexts. I have a son myself. I mean, he's an adult now, but, I taught him Dharma, but I've also taught in classes with children as young as, 8 years old, all the way to college. And this is the thing. The way that we teach children is more than simply telling them things. They learn by what they see. They learn by what they experience. So if there are individuals who, let's say, are parents, and they're concerned that they want to make sure that their children grow up with good virtues, good principles, good characteristics and behavior, that they have God in the center of their lives, etc., then this is why I tell parents all the time. I challenge them. I say, well, is that how you're living? Yeah. And of course, when I say that to them, usually their eyes will kind of, in some cases, they can legitimately say, oh, yes, I do. I do my best. Yeah. But this is number one, is that the way that we teach children is by example. So if a person is a parent, number one, don't just tell your children to be spiritual. You be spiritual. Don't just tell your children to be good. You be good. And they will learn by your example. So it begins in the family. But then by extension, as far as the schools, practically speaking, their evolution in the school system. The school system, indeed, and I can speak again mostly about America and Western Europe, but I'm sure this is becoming the case everywhere throughout the world. Yeah. The school system is systematically designed in order to create citizens of what I call the New World Order, of the global society, in which simply being a materialistic peon is the goal of life. Simply to create workers is why schools exist. Individuals who don't really think very much, who don't have reasoning abilities, who don't think very deeply about life's meaning, but who know how to work really well and take orders. That's the goal of the school system today. Right. Well, truthfully, practically speaking, that has to change. There has to be a revolution within the school system from the top. Mm-hmm. So, I can certainly talk about what a proper Vedic educational system looks like very much in depth. But practically speaking, I can paint a portrait of what that would look like. But truthfully, to have that come about, we need to change every school system systematically from the top. Their entire philosophy of why they even exist has to be changed. Yeah. But then getting to, okay, what does a Vedic education look like? Well, let me talk about that a little bit. Let's have this scenario in which things have gotten better, the system has changed, and now there are school systems in which they're teaching Dharma. Well, several things that would be of importance. Number one, all the subjects that are being taught now certainly would be taught. So, of course, mathematics and history and language, in the case of America, English, etc. All of these would still be taught, the sciences, arts, and all of this. But the idea also is that they would be taught in a unified sort of way. So, in other words, not each field simply being in its own compartment and not touching anything else, but rather be understood that the sciences also pertain to the arts, and the arts also pertain to history, and history also pertains to philosophy, etc. You see all of these fields as a whole, and you understand them as a whole. Now, what makes them a whole? That, of course, is Dharma. And now this is where we have this thread within the educational system and all the fields that are taught, where you teach these fields in accordance with natural law and natural principles. So, I can give many examples. Let's say, for example, when it comes to the sciences, when it comes to biology, of course, the way biology is taught is in a very materialistic sort of way. We are the body. The body goes through the Darwinian process of evolution and et cetera, but we are simply the body. Non-essentialism. We're not a soul. This is how science is taught. This is how biology is taught. Well, we can still teach biology. We can still teach how the processes of the body work. We can teach the how. But this is what has been missing, the why. Why do we have a body? What are we in relation to the body? Are we simply the body, or are we the person observing the body? Are we using the body? Is the body a vehicle like a car? Where if you have a car, oh, you take care of it. If you're a wise person, you change the oil, you do maintenance on your car. If there's a flat tire, you fix it, you get a new tire. But you don't believe that you are the car. You understand that you're the person driving the car. Well, in the same way, just using, again, biology as one of 100 examples I can use. What biology teaches us essentially is we are the car. We are the car. We are the body. Well, what the dharmic component would be is teaching the proper relation of our true self to that vehicle. We are not the body. We are the being, the soul within the body. And again, there are so many examples I can give like this, where you can still teach the same subjects, but from a dharmic perspective that now gives them meaning, where these are not just impersonal topics that have nothing to really do with me as a person, but now you can understand them philosophically and what they mean in the greater whole.
Oh, fantastic. All right, I think we'll do one more if that's okay, and then...
Absolutely.
All right.
Definitely.
Okay, let's see. We got a lot of them here. Okay. Can you, this is kind of... Okay, let me see if I can make sense of this one. Ong is talking about sports, but kind of relating this to Dharma, so taking this to something unphilosophical, I suppose, or less so, that even today that, he's talking about just how the goodness of sport seems to be destroyed. They've forgotten the purpose of doing sports. And I think that it's, he's talking about also like, esports, I guess he's talking about video games, but just sports in general, where we see this, where it's about money and just win at all cost and trash talking and all this. And that there also seems to be something missing. There's no Dharma awareness in sport even. So again, relating it to another topic that I wouldn't have thought of. But
Sure, yeah, and actually that it's very interesting that he brings that up, because it's a topic that I really wouldn't think of very much either, because I'm not very much into sports. But at the same time, even sports can be understood from a dharmic perspective, interestingly. And what he says is very true. Of course, the way that sports exists now, two things. First, sports are something that you view now rather than participatory, People sit on their couches and they watch a football game, a soccer game, baseball, whatever the sport is, cricket, rather than engaging in sports. Now, interestingly, in, let's say, a dharmic society, an ancient dharmic society, there were sports. But more so than just sitting and watching, the idea is that you would engage in sports. So, of course, let's say even in ancient Greek times, you had the Olympics. You had the original Olympics that was there. A lot of people don't know this. First of all, the actual Olympics goes back to truly ancient Greece, number one. Number two, it was a spiritual event. And people forget that it was to honor the gods. It was to honor Dharma that people did sports. And the idea was that, it wasn't something that you just sat and watched. I mean, they had observers, certainly. They had audiences. But the idea was that each individual player was someone who was striving to bring out the excellence of themselves in whatever their particular sports field was. And they did that as a tribute to God. That was the idea. So if they were going to throw the javelin, for example, in competition, the idea is that they would take all of their time, spend all of their time perfecting their skill. And then finally, the Olympics would happen, and they would be there in competition, not just for their own glory and fame and contracts and endorsements. And no, that didn't exist. They did it as a tribute to the gods. Let me just as an ending, let me use this as a final example. Actually, there's one of my videos on my video channel where I actually use this example. There was a movie that came out, I think, in the early '80s, Chariots of Fire. Do you remember that movie at all?
I want to see it. I in one of your videos you mentioned it, and I kind of thought,
Yes.
I need to watch this. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it is I think it won the Academy Award for Best Motion Picture of that year. It is truly an epic motion picture. It's a true story about the Olympic Games that occurred in, I think, the very early 1900s. I forget what year. But to make a long story short, it shows this one individual who, again, was a real person historically, and he was representing, I believe, England. But he was very spiritual person. And again, in a very healthy way, not a fanatic. But he tried to do everything in his life as a service to God. And I think his last name was Liddell, Liddel. I forget his first name. But people can look up this movie, Chariots of Fire. But at the very apex of this movie, he's a runner. And it shows this competition where finally he's going to run. And whoever wins this, they're going to win the gold. And he's representing England, but he's not doing it for England. And he's definitely not doing it for himself. All throughout the movie, you see this. He's doing it for God. And the most moving part of this movie is when he's running. And at a certain point, it goes to slow motion. And you see him running, and instead of looking forward, at a certain point, he closes his eyes and he looks upward at the skies with his eyes closed. It's hard for me to even talk about this without getting emotional, actually. Wow. He just looks up at the skies and he's running. And in his mind, I forget exactly how he says it, but you understand, he's saying, God, my speed is for you. Wow. My speed is for you. He's literally devoting his speed for God's service. That's a true athlete. That's a true athlete. That's someone who has perfected himself. And he was the fastest man alive when he was alive. Officially, he was considered the fastest man alive. And everything that he did not do simply for himself. Forget endorsements and contracts and money and all that stuff. He did it in humble service toward God. And as a result, however long it was, 80 years later, they create this film about this man's life that becomes the Oscar winner for that year, decades after he's no longer even alive. And he's remembered for that. How many athletes are going to be remembered? Really? How many athletes from the 50s, 60s, 70s, we know their names? No, very few. But this man is remembered because of his service attitude and his humility in perfecting his skill and doing it for God.
Well, I'm going to go see the movie. I'm going to put it on my queue and watch it. Wow, that's fantastic. Oh, fantastic. And I just want to thank you in general. Really wonderful talking to you. This has been great. I know so many big ideas. I know you could talk hours and hours and hours, and I could listen for hours and hours, but we'll just have to try it again. And like you said, meditation would be a great topic. Maybe next time we can try meditation, because I know a lot of people are interested in meditation, and we can get into more of the details of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, definitely. And thank you again for this opportunity. I truly, truly appreciate it. And let me tell you, you're a very good interviewer. This has been absolutely wonderful. I've truly enjoyed this. I've enjoyed speaking with you. And again, you yourself, you're doing truly wonderful work. And just as a closer, let me just say this, because again, I wasn't completely aware of your work until just a few weeks ago. It is absolutely wonderful and astounding today that in addition to all the practical things that you do, the courses that you have to teach people English, you do your best to also intermingle important messages in what you do, to truly talk about important topics, about spirituality, about the meaning of life, about being a good person, about succeeding in life, about all these things that a person wouldn't think, well, how is this connected to learning English? But you had the wisdom to understand that, like I was saying before, it's all connected. Mm-hmm. It's all connected. It's not merely a matter of learning a language. It's a matter of learning yourself. So you have known this. So congratulations to you for your work.
Well, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you. It's been a thrill to have this chance, and I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime. If you're open to the idea, we'll
Absolutely, definitely. Thank you so much.
Acharya, thank you so much. Yes. Okay. See you
Take care.
next time.
Absolutely. Namaste.
Namaste. Okay, very quickly, I'll just, in conclusion, wonderful. Oh, that was great. So, okay. Now, I know some of you are maybe had a little trouble with some of the vocabulary, because we're talking some big ideas, okay? These are big ideas we're talking about today. Very big philosophical ideas, and needed some big vocabulary for some. So what I'm going to do is, I think, let's see, tomorrow or the next day, this coming week, what I'm going to do is we'll go back and first I'm going to watch this again, and I'll write down some vocabulary that I think might be difficult. And then I'll also do a little bit of like a movie technique lesson with parts of the video. It's kind of long, an hour and a half, so I'll choose some sections. And movie technique, what I do is I'll show a little bit, like maybe 10 seconds, and then I'll stop and I'll explain the vocabulary, and then I'll go forward, play a little bit more, explain the vocabulary, and then come back and discuss all of the ideas. So that what happens is after I do this, then you can go and watch today's video, watch the original interview, and hopefully understand it much better. Again, this is the same technique. You can use this technique for movies, for TV shows, all this kind of real level of English that can be a little more difficult, a little faster. So anyway, I'll do that this week. I might need it. Maybe I might need two. Maybe I'll do part 1 and part 2, so that we can go back. And this is, as Acharya was talking. First of all, great ideas, very big, very philosophical, very important and meaningful. And also there was a whole lot of great vocabulary words in there for you too, at a very practical level for your English learning, which you may have missed. So I think it's an opportunity that we can come back and you can learn some of that vocabulary. We can use this as a great way to do that. And then we can also have more discussions about the ideas, because these are some big ideas, deep and powerful ideas. I know there were a lot of questions and comments that we couldn't get to, so we can also come back and you can ask those questions and comments later this week. I won't answer for him, but I'll do my best to give my own answers. And I'll certainly invite Acharya back. I'd love to discuss. Meditation is a great one. That's really, I think, useful and practical. A lot of people have questions and ask me about this topic. So I'd love to get him to talk about that as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining. As I said, I'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll do this kind of as a movie technique. Finally, what I would recommend is, let me see on my screen. Okay, right here, YouTube, Dharma Nation. That is Acharya's YouTube channel. I think that's probably the best place to start. That's where I started. And you could start with even some of the shorter videos. Really fantastic if you're interested to hear more from him. Dharma Nation, right there, YouTube, Dharma Nation. And then his actual website is the next one, dharmacentral.com. And that's where you can find his books. This is probably the best one to start with. I think Sanatana Dharma, which is the topic that we were talking about. All the things we were talking about, most of the things we're talking about are in this book. So Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way, can be found on his website. And I've got to go to bed. Let's interview Trump, Alexi says. All right, if you can get him to call me, or I can call him, I would be happy to and actually he's in Osaka right now. He's in Japan. He's in my city. Donald Trump is. He's in Osaka for a meeting. Maybe I could catch him. All right. So anyway, loved it. It was a great, really interesting, fascinating. It was hard for me to be quiet because I wanted to keep jumping in and asking more questions. But Anyway, really fascinating, very interesting. All right, so we'll be back. I've got to go to bed. Lots of love to all of you. I hope you enjoyed that. A very deep, very big one today. Wonderful. As always, go to effortlessenglishclub.com, effortlessenglishclub.com. I will add the audio from this show to the podcast when I wake up. And, of course, the video will go onto YouTube. The recording will also go onto YouTube. And I'll put all of that on my social media. Okay, lots of love to all of you, and I will see you next time. Mwah. Go to effortlessenglishclub.com and Dharma Nation YouTube. Check it out.